Cheers, I'm an engineer from very company. The topic of today's conversation will be the setup of a new drone, a newly assembled drone, using programs such as Betaflight and ESC configurators. We must start with mandatory precautions concerning your safety and the safety of your equipment, the drone and the drone accessories. When setting up, there is a need to connect to battery. And this carries certain risks. If you have propellers attached, you must definitely remove them before the setup. Make sure that when you connect the battery, there are no propellers. Similarly, before the first power on, it is mandatory to check that an antenna is installed on the drone. The absence of antenna can harm the installed video transmitter. Just like any radio transmitter without a connected antenna, it can damage the transistors when turned on. Therefore, we don't want this. Reconnect the antenna, screw it on. During the first power on of the drone, we always use a device called smoke stopper. It prevents sensitive electronics from burning out. If we solder something incorrectly or connect something improperly, or if a metallic objects fall in our electronics. In other words, it protects during the initial power-up. We connect it to the battery, connect it to the drone, and turn smoke stopper on, if such function exists. We see that the drone has turned on, the smoke stopper is working, meaning it did not shut off electronics on the drone. If there is an overload or short circuit on the drone, it will shut off. Everything is good, we can disconnect it from the drone battery and proceed to adjust the settings while being connected directly to the battery. It should be noted that it is not advisable to leave the smoke stopper during the adjustments, as we can overload it and it will shut off. It is necessary to connect the drone to the battery, on which maximum voltage corresponds to the maximum voltage of the electronics. So for drones, it's usually no more than 6S. If you connect less, for example 4S, which corresponds to about 14.8 volts, this is normal, we don't need more. In our course, a 6S battery is used, which corresponds to a voltage of around 22 volts. Fully charged is 25, fully discharged is 19. If it's lithium ion. And if it's lithium polymer, then fully discharged is down to 20 volts. During the drone setup, there are several parameters that are checked and adjusted by connecting the battery, such as video transmitter, changing channels, motor rotation direction. In other cases, the battery needs to be disconnected so that components like the video transmitter do not overheat and do not operate while being on a table. They heat up, which is normal during operation, but if the drones are stationary, not being cooled off by airflow from our propellers, they can overheat and burn our VTX. To configure and flash our new drone, you will need appropriate cable. Here we need to make sure that the cable can function as a data cable, because there are cables that can only charge, which are not suitable for us. Accordingly, we need a USB-C data cable or USB micro USB for some drones. In our course, it will be Type-C. We connect it to our computer and to our drone. In my case, we will be configuring the drone on a Windows system. For this, several drives will need to be installed. It is not difficult or time-consuming to do this at all. In the case of Mac operating system, all drivers are automatically installed, so there is no need to do this. To start configuring the FPV drone, you need to download the configurator program. It is called Beta Configurator. We need the latest version, and you can find it on the official Betaflight Configurator GitHub page. Go to the GitHub page, main menu, and there we have the Betaflight Configurator. We will see the releases. We need the latest version. So there, and at the bottom we will see the executable file. For Windows it's called 64 installer exe. Download it. After the download is complete, start the installation.
Після того, як завершилось завантаження, починаємо встановлення.
Run the installer, confirm for all users. choose language, agree to everything, choose the installation path.
Погоджуємося на все, вибираємо шлях для встановлення.
After the installation is complete, launch Betaflight.
Проклацуємо, нажимаємо «Install». Після завершення інсталяції
After the installation is complete, launch Betaflight.
дозволяємо
Allow access to networks.
мереж. Після підключення
After connecting our physical cable to the drone and the USB port on the computer,
комп'ютера, зверху в Betaflight з'являється COM4 та зачасту назва польотного контролера. Якщо так з'явилося, то всі драйвера стоять правильно, можемо переходити до налаштування. Якщо не з'явилося,
COM4 and often the name of the flight controller appear at the top of Betaflight. If it looks like this, then all the drivers are installed correctly. We can proceed to the configuration. If it doesn't appear, a bit below we see a link to install the drivers.
бачимо Windows Drivers. Включаємо. Після того, як сайту завантажились драйвера CP2110,
Register, it will ask us to register. We will see window drivers, download them. After the drivers CP2110 are downloaded from the website, we can unpack and install them. After unpacking, the archive with the drivers according to the install system on the computer, either 32-bit or 64-bit, we select the installer and agree to everything it offers.
відповідний компорт та назву польотного контролера.
We connect Betaflight and should see the corresponding port and the name of the flight controller. To continue the configuration, it is necessary to flash the ESCs with the corresponding firmware. To do this, connect the battery to the drone. We hear the initialization sound. These are 3 beeps and then 2 more, which confirm the connection with the flight controller. If we heard 5 of those tones, we can connect the USB-C cable to the flight controller. And in Chrome, with an internet connection, we go to the ESC configurator. Just type it in the search bar.
ESC-конфігуратор.
If we have Betaflight configurator open, it must be closed, because if one connection is installed, the second one will not be able to connect. So we close Betaflight configurator, open escconfigurator.com,
Закриваємо Betaflight,
select the serial port,
конфігуратор, вибираємо серійний порт. Тут. Якщо драйвера
if the drivers were installed correctly, it will be displayed here.
нажимаємо
We press connect button,
приймаємо
accept the cookies and press read settings, which means read the settings from our ESCs.
Зараз
Now it should detect all our ESCs, that is 4 in 1. It should detect all 4 ESCs. If that's the case, then we can see their settings now.
налаштування.
To flash ESCs with the appropriate firmware, which we need, we press flash all ESCs at the bottom right. We select the firmware type for Bluejay. We don't touch the ESC's version, but at the bottom we select the latest one, 0.19.2. We set the PWM frequency to 24 kHz and press flash. We wait and don't touch the drone. Do not disconnect power, preferably don't even breathe. This is to avoid interrupting the flashing process. If it gets interrupted, the ESC may enter a mode where it will be impossible to recover it by conventional means. We don't want that. After the last ESC finishes flashing, after the last ESC finishes flashing, we will see in the status bar that the time it took for this
Flashed for
to happen, and the firmware of all our ESCs will change from BL-HELIS to Bluejay. Accordingly, the version and the PWM frequency are displayed. Now, if we change a few parameters, motor timing to medium, and save these parameters using the right setting button, we will hear a different tone. Disconnecting. Now, this is a slightly different sound, which means that our ESCs have been successfully flashed. Now we can close this tab and move on to Betaflight settings. Press Connect and go to the upload of ready-made settings. Preset. This preset is provided. It looks like a text document. It can be opened, viewed, but it is not necessarily. We don't have to do this. Go to our Betaflight. We have two places where we can do this. Either on the Presets tab. Here we see just presets from the internet. Someone made them, we don't know them. We need to click the small load backup button at the top here. We click, it kicks us into the Explorer. Here we can choose where the preset file you provided is saved. In my case, it is in the downloaded folder. Here it is, I select and wait. It has now applied all the settings, so there is no need to manually do anything. It has rebooted and saved all the settings. After uploading the preset, we go to the main page on Setup, and we see the 3D model of the drone.
Після заливки пресету переходимо на головну сторінку або Setup та бачимо 3D-модель дрона. Нажимаємо Reset Z-Axis.
We click Reset Z-Axis. This button allows us to visually orient the drone facing us for convenience. If we tilt the drone in real life, it will tilt accordingly in the program. This is necessary to check if the flight controller is properly installed. We take the drone in our hands and tilt it forward, backward, right and left, and accordingly we see if the drone does the same on the 3D model. If all movements align, meaning forward tilt is forward, backward tilt is backward, left is left, right is right, then everything is good. Let's move on to checking the motor rotation direction. Here I emphasize again that all propellers must be removed to avoid damaging your fingers, face and electronics. Connect the battery to the drone and listen for the initialization sound, which consists of 3 tones. One initializes the ESC itself, and 2 more confirm the connection to the flight controller. If we have any problem with the connection of ESCs to the flight controller or with the flight controller itself, then we will not hear these 2 sounds at the end. This often occurs when the cable from ESC to the flight controller is not securely inserted into one of the connectors. Simply take a non-conductive tweezer or stick or toothpick and check that the connector is properly inserted into the socket. After connecting the battery, we can go to Motors tab, and here we see this magical button, the motor direction. Press it, confirm that our propellers are removed. I emphasize again, remove the propellers. The individually button means that we will now check each motor separately. By default, they do not start spinning. Also make sure there are no wires or any fabric near the motors, so as not to get caught as the motors will spin now. Hold the drone as it may move on the table, and when we press the corresponding motor, as we can see on the diagram, they are labeled, it will spin. If we press directly and the motor did not spin, if we pressed quickly and the motor did not spin, it's okay. Press and hold a little longer. As we can see, the motor is spinning. I look at it and I understand
Ми нажимаємо
in which direction it is spinning. It should match the direction indicated on the diagram that is displayed to us. If it suddenly rotates in the wrong direction, we press either normal or reverse. One of these buttons will make it rotate in the desired direction. For example, right now it is rotating correctly according to the diagram. I press normal button, it continues to rotate in the same direction. I press reverse and it starts rotating in the opposite direction.
без пропелерів.
We don't want this, so I go back to its initial direction and move on to the second motor. When checking the direction of the motor rotation again, without propellers.
За бокову частину ми можемо
You may not visually see how it rotates, so that's why you have to touch it slightly on the bell. Touch the side because touching the top will be unpleasant. We can touch it lightly on the side so we don't stop the motor because it will rotate at a minimum power. So I hold the button here, the motor rotates, I touch it, feel that it rotates in the direction of the flight controller. This corresponds to the diagram, so everything is correct. By touching the side of the motor, you can feel where the finger wants to go. So let's go through all the motors, checking that their order, as shown in the diagram, correct, and that the rotation direction also matches the diagram. Everything is correct for me, so I'm closing this tab. Alright, the drone is ready to fly. In general, there are two motor rotation diagrams for drones. In the first diagram, the motors rotate towards the camera and the antenna. In the second diagram, the motors rotate inward towards the flight controller, both the front and rear pairs of motors. In our case, in our settings, the motors rotate towards the flight controller. This is done so that if grass or dirt gets into the propellers, they don't throw it towards the camera and obstruct the view. Another important thing to check with your drone is the power adjustment and channel selection on the video transmitter. Again, a video transmitter needs to be turned on with antenna in place, otherwise we will irreversibly damage the VTX.
тому що якщо ми включимо без
Usually video transmitters have some indicators
можемо подивитися.
that show the power channel and band. This can be either LED indicators or a segmented display.
Це або
We go to the video transmitter tab.
сегментований дисплей.
The video transmitter, we see that it says device ready,
Трансмітер
which means that the control is working.
девайс ready.
Some communication is happening between the flight controller and our video transmitter. If it says no, then either a wire is not soldered somewhere, or the video transmitter connector is not properly inserted, or something is configured incorrectly. Let's see which channel and band are set. Currently R1 is set. The segmented display on the video transmitter shows R1.
На відеопередавачі
The propeller is set to maximum, and accordingly it is maximum here, so everything is working correctly.
тут відповідно максимально. Тобто все правильно працює.
Please note that after you configured everything, you have to transfer the drone to professionals who understand all aspects of drone operation. They will practically test it, meaning they will suspend load, fly around, and will do extensive testing with the load to ensure that the drone is ready for combat missions.